My name is Rosalind, and I'm 62 years old, 5 years a widow. I thought buying my daughter Catherine and her husband Jackson a luxury home would be my greatest gift to them. Never did I imagine standing in the driveway, tears streaming down my face as they told me I wasn't welcome anymore. The betrayal from my only child cut deeper than any wound I've ever known. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you believe gratitude still matters in this world. Let me take you through my story. After my husband Charles passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, my life changed completely. We'd built a beautiful marriage over 35 years, working side by side to grow our small furniture store into a successful chain of local shops. Charles was my rock, my partner in everything, and losing him left a hole in my heart that I knew would never fully heal. Catherine was our only child, the light of our lives. Growing up, she was such a sweet, intelligent girl with a kind heart. We were always close, shopping together, cooking Sunday dinners, and talking about everything from school to boys to her dreams for the future. I watched her grow from a curious little girl into a confident young woman, and my heart swelled with pride when she graduated college with honors and landed her first job at a marketing firm. I come from a middle-class background, and both Charles and I worked incredibly hard our entire lives. Nothing was ever handed to us. We started our furniture business with a small loan and built it through years of 7-day work weeks, careful budgeting, and reinvesting nearly every penny of profit. We taught Catherine the value of hard work and financial responsibility, or at least we tried to. Everything started to change when Catherine met Jackson 3 years ago. He came from a wealthy family, or so he claimed, and always dressed in designer clothes and drove expensive cars. He worked in real estate development, though I noticed he changed positions frequently. Catherine was completely charmed by his charisma and grand promises. When they announced their engagement after just 6 months of dating, I had my reservations but kept them to myself. Charles had just passed away, and I didn't want to risk my relationship with my only child. I smiled through their wedding, even as I noticed how Jackson seemed more interested in the cost of everything than in making Catherine happy. After Charles died, I decided to sell our business. It was too painful to continue without him, and at 62, I was ready for a simpler life. The business sold for $1.2 million, the culmination of our life's work. I invested most of it planning for a comfortable but modest retirement. Catherine and Jackson had been renting an apartment since they got married. Every time I visited, Jackson would complain about their landlord or how much they were paying in rent. "It's highway robbery," he'd say, while showing me some new electronic gadget he'd bought or telling me about the exclusive restaurant they'd tried. One evening during dinner at my place, Jackson brought up the subject again. "We're basically throwing money away on rent," he said between bites of the roast I'd spent hours preparing. "If only we could get a place of our own." Catherine nodded enthusiastically. "The housing market is so competitive right now. By the time we save enough for a down payment, prices will be even higher." Something in my daughter's eyes, that hopeful look I'd known since she was small, made me offer before I'd fully thought it through. "What if I helped you buy a house?" I suggested. "I could use some of the money from selling the business." Their faces lit up instantly. Lit up. Jackson put down his fork. "Rosalind, that would be incredible. You have no idea what that would mean to us." Catherine rushed around the table to hug me. "Mom, are you serious? That would change everything for us." In that moment, seeing my daughter so happy, I felt like I'd found a purpose again after losing Charles. I could help them start their life together, give them a solid foundation. It would be an investment in their future and my relationship with them. "Let's start looking," I said, already picturing Sunday dinners in their new home, maybe even grandchildren someday playing in the backyard. "I want to help you both get established." What I didn't realize then was how quickly Catherine was changing under Jackson's influence. My sweet, thoughtful daughter was becoming more materialistic, more focused on appearances. She called less frequently, and when we did talk, it was often about things they wanted to buy or exclusive events they'd attended. I told myself it was just a phase, that she was enjoying being a newlywed and exploring Jackson's lifestyle. I never imagined that my gesture of love would end up costing me so much more than money. During our next few meetings, we discussed budgets and neighborhoods. I initially suggested a reasonable starter home around $600,000, a generous gift by any standard. Jackson's face fell immediately. "In this market, that barely gets you a decent condo," he scoffed. "And with property values rising, it's not even a good investment." Catherine chimed in. "We were hoping for something in a better school district too, Mom, for the future." The mention of potential grandchildren softened my resolve, and I agreed to look at properties up to 700,000. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a pattern. My offering their pushing for more and my eventual yielding out of love for my daughter. As the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in Catherine's behavior toward me. She became more distant, often siding with Jackson in discussions rather than considering my perspective. The daughter who once called me for advice about everything now seemed to view me as simply a means to an end. But I pushed these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the joy of helping them establish their home. Our house hunting began in earnest the following weekend. I'd arranged for a well-regarded real estate agent named Diane to show us properties within our budget. I'd been clear about my price range, $700,000 maximum, but Jackson had other ideas. We should look at a few places slightly above budget too, he suggested smoothly as we sat in Diane's office. Just to get a sense of what's out there. Sometimes sellers are willing to negotiate. The first house we viewed was a charming colonial within budget. It needed some updates but had good bones and a lovely backyard. This has potential, I said, imagining Catherine planting a garden as she'd always talked about doing. Catherine wrinkled her nose. It's so outdated, Mom, and that kitchen is tiny. The master bathroom needs a complete overhaul, Jackson added. That's at least 50,000 right there. This pattern continued through the next 5 properties. Each time I would see the potential in a home within our budget, and each time Catherine and Jackson would find fatal flaws. Diane's expression grew increasingly strained as the day wore on. By the third weekend of house hunting, Jackson had somehow convinced us to look at properties in the 800,000 range. It's only a little more, he argued, and you'll get so much more for your money. We walked into a newly renovated Tudor-style home in an upscale neighborhood, and I watched Catherine's eyes light up. This is it, she whispered, squeezing Jackson's hand. The house was undeniably beautiful. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths with high-end finishes throughout. The kitchen featured marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The backyard had a patio perfect for entertaining and enough grass for children to play. What do you think, Rosalind? Jackson asked, a triumphant smile playing at his lips. I hesitated. It's lovely, but it's listed at 850,000. That's well beyond what we discussed. But think of it as an investment, he countered. This neighborhood is appreciating faster than any other in the area, and with these finishes, we wouldn't have to renovate anything. Catherine took my hands in hers. Mom, I know it's asking a lot, but this is our dream home. We could raise a family here, have you over for holidays. It would be perfect. I looked into my daughter's hopeful eyes and felt my resolve crumble. Charles and I had worked so hard to give her the best life possible. Maybe this was my chance to continue that legacy, so let me think about it, I said carefully. That night, I pored over my finances. The truth was I could afford the house, especially if I adjusted some of my investment plans, but something kept nagging at me. A sense that no matter what house we found, Jackson would always want more. Still, the thought of Catherine's happiness won out. The next morning, I called Diane and told her we'd make an offer on the Tudor home. The negotiations were tense. Another buyer was interested, and we ended up offering $845,000. Just $5,000 under asking price. When our offer was accepted, Catherine squealed with delight and hugged me tight. You're the best mom in the world, she whispered. It was the first genuine moment we'd shared in months. At the closing, I had a serious discussion with my attorney about how to structure the purchase. Though I was paying for the house in full, I wanted to protect my investment while still providing for Catherine. I recommend keeping the house in your name for now, my attorney advised. You can set up a transfer of ownership to take place after a certain period, say 5 years. This seemed reasonable to me. I'd still be giving them the house, but ensuring it wasn't immediately sold or remortgaged. When I explained this to Catherine and Jackson, I saw a flash of something. Annoyance, disappointment, crossed Jackson's face. We were hoping to build equity right away, Saima, he said. You will be, Pa, I explained. You'll be living there payment-free, saving what would have been your mortgage, and in 5 years the house will be completely yours. Catherine squeezed his arm. It's more than fair, Jackson. Mom is being incredibly generous. He nodded, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Thank you, Rosalind. The day we got the keys should have been joyous. We stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the large windows, the future full of possibilities. I had brought champagne to celebrate. To new beginnings. I toasted, handing them each a glass. Catherine smiled, but it seemed forced. Jackson checked his watch. "We should probably start measuring for furniture," he said, pulling out his phone. "The movers are coming next week." As they moved from room to room discussing their plans, I felt strangely excluded. This was supposed to be a shared joy, but instead, I felt like an outsider looking in. I tried to brush aside the feeling. After all, this was their home now. It was natural they'd want to make it their own. What I didn't realize was how literal that exclusion would soon become. Catherine and Jackson wasted no time moving into their new home. When I offered to help with the packing and moving process, Catherine quickly declined, saying, "We've hired twin professional movers, Mom. There's really nothing for you to do," she said over the phone. "Besides, Jackson wants to supervise everything himself. He's very particular about how things are handled." Feeling somewhat dejected but understanding, I decided to contribute in other ways. I spent several days shopping for housewarming gifts, quality kitchenware, luxurious bedding, and some tasteful decorative pieces I thought would complement their style. When I brought these items over, Jackson barely concealed his disdain. "That's very traditional," he said, examining the crystal vase I'd selected. "We were going for more of a modern, minimalist aesthetic." "The bedding is a bit fussy for our taste," Catherine added, barely looking at the Egyptian cotton sheets I'd spent hours selecting. I swallowed my hurt. "Well, you can always exchange them if they don't work for you. I kept all the receipts." "Great," Jackson said, already turning away. "We should probably get back to unpacking." And this was the first of many subtle rejections over the following weeks. I'd suggest coming over to help organize the kitchen, and Catherine would tell me they were too busy. I'd propose bringing dinner on moving day, and she'd say they had already ordered in. Every attempt to participate in creating their new home was politely but firmly rebuffed. I tried to remember what it was like when Charles and I first bought our home. We'd been young and eager to establish our independence too. Perhaps Catherine and Jackson just needed space to make the house their own. Still, the distance hurt, especially given how close Catherine and I had always been. Growing up, Catherine had been my little shadow in the kitchen. I taught her to make Charles's favorite lasagna when she was just 10 years old, standing on a step stool to reach the counter. We'd spent countless hours cooking together, sharing stories and laughter as we created meals for our family. Those memories made her current coldness all the more painful. Despite the increasing distance, I was determined to make their housewarming party special. When Catherine finally mentioned they were planning a small gathering to celebrate their new home, I immediately offered to prepare the food. "That's so much work, Mom," Catherine protested weakly. "I want to do it," I insisted. "It's my gift to you both." After some back and forth, she reluctantly agreed, though she specified that they wanted simple, elegant appetizers, nothing too heavy or old-fashioned. I spent days planning the menu, selecting recipes that would impress their friends while still providing the comfort of home-cooked food. I chose upscale versions of classics: mini crab cakes, stuffed mushrooms, artisanal cheese boards, and my special champagne punch that had always been a hit at our family gatherings. The week before the party, I called Catherine to confirm details. "So the party starts at 6 on Saturday, right? I'll come over early to set up." There was a pause on the line. "Actually, we decided to move it to Friday instead. Jackson's colleague is having an event on Saturday." "Friday? But that's tomorrow," I said, trying to hide my panic. "I haven't even done the shopping yet." "I'm really sorry for the last-minute change," Catherine said, not sounding particularly sorry. "If it's too much trouble, we can just order catering." No, I said quickly. "I can make it work. I'll just need to rearrange a few things." I spent that night and the next day in a flurry of activity. Shopping, prepping, cooking, barely taking time to rest. By Friday afternoon, my car was loaded with trays of food, serving platters, and decorative touches I thought would enhance their party. As I drove to their house, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Despite the stress of the last-minute change, I was looking forward to seeing their home filled with friends, to being part of this milestone event. In my mind, I pictured Catherine proudly introducing me as her mother, the person who had made their dream home possible. I imagined conversations with their friends, perhaps making connections with people who would be part of my daughter's new life. Little did I know how different the reality would be from these hopeful imaginings. The party I had worked so hard to prepare for would become one of the most painful experiences of my life, a clear message that in their new home there was no place for me. I arrived at Catherine and Jackson's house 2 hours before the party was scheduled to begin. My car was packed with trays of carefully prepared appetizers, my special champagne punch, and a few last-minute decorative touches I thought would make their home feel warm and festive. As I pulled into their driveway, I was surprised to see several cars already parked along the street. Perhaps they'd invited a few close friends to come early and help set up. I gathered the first few trays and made my way to the front door, excited despite my exhaustion from the marathon cooking session. I rang the doorbell, balancing the heavy trays in my arms. After a moment, Jackson opened the door, dressed in an expensive-looking suit. Behind him, I could see at least 20 people milling about, drinks in hand. Music played and the sound of laughter filled the air. "Rosalind," he said, looking startled, "you're here." "Of course I'm here," I replied, confused. "I brought the food for the party. Could you help me with these trays?" "There's more in the car." Jackson hesitated, then reluctantly took one of the trays. "We thought you might not make it, so we ordered some catering. But I'm sure we can use this too." As I stepped into the house, I realized with a sinking heart that the party was already in full swing. People were clustered in conversation groups, wine glasses filled small plates of food in their hands. A catering staff in black uniforms circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Catherine spotted me and came over, her smile tight. "Mom, you made it." "The party started early," I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "Jackson thought it would be better to start at 4 instead of 6, she explained. "I meant to call you, but things got so hectic with the last-minute arrangements." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I had spent the entire previous night and day preparing food they clearly didn't need or want. The realization was like a physical pain in my chest. "Let me introduce you to some people," Catherine said, perhaps sensing my discomfort. She led me to a group of women around her age, all perfectly coiffed and wearing designer clothing. "This is my mother, Rosalind." The women smiled politely, but I noticed Catherine didn't mention that I had purchased the house we were standing in. One woman asked how I was enjoying retirement, and another made a comment about how nice it must be to have a daughter in such a beautiful home. "Actually, I began, but Catherine quickly interrupted. "Mom, could you help me in the kitchen? We need to put out some more wine glasses." In the kitchen, she turned to me with a strained expression. "Everything looks wonderful, Mom. Thank you for all the food. Why don't you put it out on the dining room table?" I looked around at the bustling catering staff. "It seems like you have plenty of help already." "They're handling the past appetizers, but we can set up your food as a buffet," she said, already moving toward the door. "Jackson's boss just arrived. I need to go say hello." Left alone in the kitchen, I began unpacking my containers and arranging the food on platters. One of the catering staff gave me a curious look but said nothing as I worked alongside them. For the next hour, I found myself in a strange limbo. Not quite a guest, not quite a host, certainly not acknowledged as the person who had made this entire home possible. I circulated awkwardly, trying to join conversations, but always feeling like an outsider. Several times I overheard guests complimenting Jackson and Catherine on their beautiful new home. At one point, I was standing near the kitchen doorway when I overheard Jackson talking to a group of men I assumed were his colleagues. "It's taken some maneuvering, but we finally got the place," he was saying, swirling expensive scotch in a crystal tumbler, one that I recognized as part of a set I had given them. "The market's insane right now, but sometimes opportunities fall into your lap." "You must have saved like crazy for the down payment," one man commented. Jackson laughed. "Let's just say we had some family assistance that worked out in our favor. The important thing is getting your foot in the door in a neighborhood like this. Property values here are only going up." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. Family assistance. I had purchased the entire house outright, not just provided help with a down payment. As I turned to walk away, I nearly bumped into Catherine. The look on my face must have told her I'd overheard because her expression immediately turned defensive. "He's just talking business, Mom," she whispered. "His colleagues don't need to know all our personal financial details." "I didn't realize my contribution was a secret," I replied quietly. Catherine sighed. "It's not a secret, it's just complicated. Jackson needs to maintain a certain image with his work associates. Before I could respond, Jackson appeared beside us. There you are, Catherine. The Hendersons want to see the upstairs. Could you give them a tour? His tone was pleasant, but there was a dismissive glance in my direction that made it clear I wasn't included in this invitation. As Catherine walked away with another couple, Jackson turned to me. Rosalind, would you mind checking on the food in the dining room? I think some of the trays need to be refilled. I stared at him incredulously. You want me to serve food at my daughter's party in the home that I bought? Someone needs to do it, he replied smoothly. And since you prepared it, you'd know best how to arrange it. Swallowing my pride and not wanting to create a scene at Catherine's party, I did as he asked. As I rearranged the food trays that guests had picked over, I overheard two women talking nearby, not realizing I could hear them. Jackson's mother-in-law is actually serving the food, one whispered. Isn't that strange? I heard she lives nearby and just can't let go, the other replied. Some parents have such a hard time giving their children independence. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back furiously. This was not how this day was supposed to go. This was not how any of this was supposed to be. Later, as guests were finishing dinner and moving to the living room for dessert, I was in the kitchen wrapping leftovers when I overheard Jackson talking to a friend near the doorway. Finally got the house from the old lady, he was saying in a low voice. Took some convincing, but Catherine knows how to handle her mother. His friend laughed. Nice work, man. Place like this in this neighborhood, you scored big time. I froze, container in hand, as Catherine's voice joined theirs. Shh, she might hear you, she warned, but she was laughing too. Don't worry, Jackson replied. A few more months and we won't have to worry about that anymore. My hands trembled as I set down the container. What were they planning? Why would they not need to worry about me in a few months? I had just decided to confront them when Jackson walked into the kitchen, his expression changing to surprise when he saw me. Rosalind, there you are. We're about to serve dessert. I heard what you said. I told him, my voice shaking. About getting the house from the old lady. About not having to worry about me in a few months. Jackson's face hardened. You misunderstood. We were talking about something else entirely. I know what I heard. I insisted, tears threatening again. This whole time has this just been about getting a free house? Before Jackson could answer, several guests entered the kitchen, looking for dessert plates. He quickly plastered on a smile and directed them to the dining room. When they left, he turned back to me, all pretense of pleasantness gone. I think it's time for you to go home, Rosalind. You're clearly tired and imagining things. I want to talk to Catherine, I said firmly. She's busy with our guests, he replied, and frankly, you're becoming a bit of a downer at our celebration. Celebration of what? I demanded. Of successfully manipulating me. Jackson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Let's get something straight. We appreciate the house, but Catherine and I are building our lives now. We don't need you hovering around trying to control everything and make it all about you. I stepped back, shocked by his sudden hostility. Thanks for the food, he continued, but I think we're good here. You should head home and get some rest. Not until I speak with my daughter, I insisted. Jackson sighed dramatically and called out, Catherine, could you come here for a minute? Catherine appeared moments later, her face flushed from wine and conversation. What's going on? Your mother is feeling tired, Jackson said before I could speak. I suggested she might want to head home, but she wanted to say goodnight to you first. Catherine looked between us, confusion crossing her features. Mom, are you okay? No, I'm not okay, I began. I just overheard Jackson. She's had a long day preparing all this food. Jackson interrupted smoothly. And I think the wine might have gone to her head a bit. I have not been drinking, I said firmly. Catherine, can we talk privately for a moment? Before she could answer, Jackson spoke again, his voice suddenly loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Thank you so much for all your help today, Rosalind. We really appreciate you coming by, but we can handle everything from here. Several guests turned to look at us, and Catherine's expression turned mortified. Mom, maybe it would be better if we talked tomorrow, she said quietly. You do look tired, and we have a lot of guests. I stood there looking at my daughter, my only child, whom I'd loved fiercely her entire life, as she chose her husband's side over mine once again. In that moment, something broke inside me. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. I'll go. As I gathered my purse and coat, Jackson followed me to the door, maintaining his hospitable facade for the benefit of any watching guests, but at the front door, with no one else in earshot, he delivered the final blow. Thanks for the house, Rosalind, he said with a cold smile. But we don't need you now. I stood frozen on the doorstep, unable to believe what I'd just heard. Catherine appeared behind him, looking uncomfortable but not contradicting her husband. Jackson, she said softly, a weak protest at best. It's the truth, babe, he replied. Your mom needs to understand we're adults building our own life. She can't buy her way into controlling us. Is that what you think? I asked Catherine directly, my voice breaking. That I'm trying to control you by helping you? Catherine wouldn't meet my eyes. You do tend to take over, Mom, and we need our space. Space in the house that I bought for you, I said, tears finally spilling over. The house I spent my retirement savings on. And we're grateful, Jackson said dismissively. But the party's still going on, so... He began to close the door. The last thing I saw was Catherine's face, conflicted but silent, as I stood on the porch of the home I had purchased, being shut out both literally and figuratively from my daughter's life. Humiliated and heartbroken, I walked to my car through tears, aware that several party guests were watching from windows. As I drove away from the beautiful Tudor home I had sacrificed so much for, I felt a devastating sense of loss, not just of money, but of the relationship I thought I had with my daughter. The drive home that night passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. I kept replaying Jackson's cruel words and Catherine's silent complicity, wondering how we had arrived at this point. When had my sweet, loving daughter become someone who would stand by while her mother was publicly humiliated and dismissed? I pulled into the driveway of my modest condominium, the place I'd downsized to after selling our family home, thinking I was making a prudent financial decision to secure my retirement and help Catherine start her life. Now it felt like a symbol of all I had given up, with nothing to show for it but heartache. Inside, I sat in the darkness of my living room, too drained even to turn on the lights. The silent space around me felt vast and empty. For the first time since Charles died, I felt truly alone. When the phone rang, I grabbed it quickly, hoping it was Catherine calling to apologize. Instead, it was my best friend Sarah checking in, as she often did on Friday evenings. "How was the housewarming party?" she asked cheerfully. "Did everyone love your food?" The simple question broke the dam, and I dissolved into sobs, barely able to form coherent sentences as I recounted the evening's humiliations. Sarah listened in horrified silence. When I finally finished, she said firmly, "I'm coming over. Don't argue. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to her word, Sarah arrived bearing a bottle of wine and a fierce, protective energy that immediately made me feel less alone. As we sat at my kitchen table, she helped me process what had happened. "You know this isn't about you, right?" she said, refilling our glasses. "This is about Jackson. He's isolated Catherine from you because you represent a threat to his control." "But she's a grown woman," I protested. "How could she not see what he's doing?" Sarah sighed. "It happens gradually. From what you've told me, he's been working on her for years, subtly turning her against you, making her dependent on him for validation. And now he's got what he wanted. The house. A house that's still in my name," I remembered suddenly. "I kept the title in my name with a transfer to take place in 5 years. Sarah's eyes widened. "That's probably what he meant about not having to worry about you in a few months. They must have a plan to get you to sign over the house sooner." The realization sent a chill through me. What should I do? "First thing Monday morning, you call your attorney," Sarah said decisively. "Figure out exactly where you stand legally. That house is yours, and they have no right to treat you this way." The next morning, still reeling from the previous night's events, I called my attorney's office and left an urgent message. Angela, my attorney, called back within an hour and I poured out the whole story. "I'm so sorry this happened," she said when I finished. "But from a legal standpoint, you're in a strong position. The house is entirely in your name. They have no ownership interest at this point." "So, what are my options?" I asked. "Several," she replied. "You could evict them, though that's quite drastic. You could require them to pay rent if they want to stay. Or you could maintain the status quo but be very clear that any attempt to pressure you into transferring ownership early will not be tolerated." We scheduled a meeting for Monday to discuss the details. After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had legal recourse, but the fact that I needed it broke my heart. That afternoon, I drove to Catherine and Jackson's neighborhood, my house, I reminded myself, and parked down the street. I wasn't sure what I hoped to accomplish, but I needed to see the place in daylight to remind myself it was real. Several luxury cars were parked in the driveway, including a new BMW I didn't recognize. As I watched, Jackson emerged from the house with three men in business attire. They were laughing and shaking hands as if celebrating something. A terrible suspicion formed in my mind. I grabbed my phone and called a friend who worked in banking. "Jennifer, if someone wanted to take out a home equity loan, would they need to be on the title of the house?" I asked without preamble. "Absolutely, she confirmed. The lender would verify ownership through title records." "Why do you ask?" I explained the situation briefly, and her response confirmed my fears. If they're trying to get a loan on a house that's not in their name, they'd either need your permission and signature or— "Or what?" I pressed when she hesitated. "Or they'd need to forge your signature," she finished reluctantly. "Which would be fraud, of course." After thanking her, I sat in my car, hands shaking. Was this what Jackson was planning, to somehow get a loan using my house as collateral? The men I'd seen could easily have been loan officers or mortgage brokers. I needed more information. Using the private investigator Sarah had recommended, I began looking into Jackson's background and current financial situation. What I discovered over the next few days shocked me. Far from the successful real estate developer he claimed to be, Jackson had a history of failed business ventures and significant personal debt. He'd been sued twice by former business partners and had a pattern of living beyond his means. Catherine likely had no idea about any of this. Most alarmingly, the investigator discovered that Jackson had recently applied for a home equity line of credit, claiming to be the owner of the Tudor house. The application included what appeared to be my signature on several documents. Armed with this information, I met with Angela on Monday morning. She listened gravely to my findings. "This is serious," she said. "He's attempting to commit fraud. We need to act quickly before any loan is approved." We spent the next 2 hours drafting a series of legal documents, a formal notice to Catherine and Jackson that they were not authorized to represent themselves as owners of the property, a letter to the bank clarifying that any loan applications were fraudulent, and a notice that they would need to begin paying market-rate rent if they wished to continue living in the house. "What if they refuse to pay?" I asked as I signed the documents. Angela's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Then you have every right to begin eviction proceedings. It's your house, Rosalind." "I never thought it would come to this," I said quietly. "I was trying to help them not create a legal battle." "This isn't your doing," she reminded me gently. "They've put you in this position by attempting to take advantage of your generosity." That evening, I tried calling Catherine once more. I wanted to give her a chance to explain to make things right before the legal notices were delivered. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a message asking her to call me back about an urgent matter but didn't provide details. She didn't return my call that night nor the next day. On Wednesday, the formal notices were delivered to the house by courier. That evening, my phone rang. It was Catherine, and she was furious. "How could you do this?" she demanded without greeting. "You're threatening to evict us from our home." "It's not your home, Catherine," I said as calmly as I could. "It's my house, which I allowed you to live in out of love. And your husband is trying to take out loans against it fraudulently." "That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "Jackson would never do something like that. He said you're just trying to control us because you're jealous of our happiness." The accusation stung, but I pressed on. "Catherine, I have proof. Jackson submitted loan applications with my forged signature. That's a crime." "You've never liked him," she accused. You've been trying to come between us from the beginning. Mom, you're always doing this, trying to control my life, thinking you know what's best for me. Her words felt like physical blows. That's not true. I've supported your choices even when I had reservations. I bought you a house for heaven's sake. And now you're using it to manipulate me, she shot back. If you really wanted to help us, you would have put the house in our names from the beginning. Instead, you kept control so you could hold it over our heads. I realized with a sinking heart that Jackson had thoroughly poisoned her perspective. There would be no reasoning with her now. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said finally. But the facts remain. If you and Jackson want to continue living in my house, you'll need to pay rent. And any attempts to take out loans against the property will be reported to the authorities as fraud. You'll regret this, Catherine said, her voice cold. You're going to end up all alone. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. My own daughter had just threatened me for protecting myself from her husband's illegal scheme. In that moment, I knew I had lost her, at least for now, but I also knew I needed to stand firm, both for my own welfare and ultimately for hers. The next day, I contacted the bank where Jackson had applied for the loan and provided documentation proving I was the sole owner of the property and had not authorized any loans. The application was immediately flagged for fraud investigation. I also reported the forgery to the police, providing the documents the investigator had uncovered. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, knowing it could result in legal consequences for my daughter's husband. But Sarah's words kept echoing in my mind. This isn't about you. This is about Jackson and his manipulation. For the next week, I heard nothing from Catherine or Jackson. According to my attorney, they had not responded to the rental agreement proposal. I lived in a state of anxious limbo, wondering what would happen next, and mourning the relationship with my daughter that seemed irreparably damaged. Then, exactly 1 week after I'd sent the legal notices, my phone rang with Catherine's number. I answered cautiously, expecting more accusations and anger. Instead, her voice came through in a panic. "Daddy, we've been evicted from the house, help!" My heart stopped at her words. She hadn't called me daddy since she was a little girl, and the confusion in that moment of crisis spoke volumes about her emotional state. "Catherine, what's happening?" I asked urgently. "There are police officers here," she sobbed. "They say we have to leave right now. Jackson's been arrested. They're saying something about fraud. Mom, I don't understand what's happening." "Stay there," I said, already grabbing my keys. "I'm on my way." I drove to the house at a speed that would have earned me a ticket had any police officers been watching. My mind raced faster than my car, trying to process what Catherine had told me. Jackson arrested an eviction. I hadn't requested an eviction. I'd only asked for them to start paying rent. When I arrived at the Tudor home, the scene was chaotic. 2 police cruisers were parked in the driveway, lights flashing. A small group of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, watching with poorly disguised curiosity. On the front lawn sat several hastily packed suitcases and boxes. I spotted Catherine immediately. She was sitting on the front steps, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Jackson was nowhere to be seen, but a police officer stood near Catherine, looking uncomfortable with the emotional display. I parked quickly and rushed to my daughter's side. "Catherine, what happened?" She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, makeup smudged. For a moment, she looked so much like the little girl who used to run to me with scraped knees that my heart twisted painfully. "Mom," she choked out, then threw herself into my arms. I held her tightly, feeling her body tremble against mine. The police officer approached us. "Ma'am, are you Rosalind Miller, the owner of this property?" I nodded, still holding my crying daughter. "I'm Officer Ramirez. We have a warrant for the arrest of Jackson Turner on charges of attempted bank fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The bank contacted us after your report, and their investigation uncovered multiple instances of fraud." "What about the eviction?" I asked, confused. "I didn't request an eviction order." The officer consulted his notepad. "The eviction isn't related to your complaint, ma'am. It's from a judgment creditor. Apparently, Mr. Turner lost a civil suit 6 months ago and never paid the judgment. The creditor discovered this property and filed for attachment, but when they investigated, they found it wasn't actually owned by Mr. Turner." My mind reeled. Another lawsuit I knew nothing about. How much had Jackson been hiding? "Can my daughter stay in the house?" I asked. "I'm the legal owner and she has my permission." Officer Ramirez shook his head regretfully. I'm sorry, but there's more. While executing the warrant, we discovered evidence of additional financial crimes. The house has been temporarily designated as a crime scene until our financial crimes unit can complete their investigation. No one can stay here for at least 48 hours. Catherine let out another sob against my shoulder. I tightened my arm around her. Where's Jackson now? I asked. He's been taken to the county jail for processing, Officer Ramirez replied. Bail hearing will probably be tomorrow morning. I nodded, trying to think clearly. Can we at least get some more of my daughter's personal belongings? The officer agreed to let Catherine gather essential items under supervision. As she went inside with another officer, I stayed on the porch trying to make sense of what had happened. A car door slammed nearby, and I looked up to see a well-dressed man approaching with purposeful strides. He introduced himself as Detective Morgan from the Financial Crimes Division. Mrs. Miller, I'm glad you're here. We have some questions about your son-in-law's activities. Over the next 20 minutes, the detective revealed a pattern of financial deceit that left me stunned. Jackson had apparently been running a complex scheme involving multiple fraudulent loan applications using various properties as collateral, properties he didn't actually own. Your report about the forgery on your house documents was what finally gave us enough to move on him, Detective Morgan explained. We've been tracking his activities for months but couldn't prove criminal intent until now. My daughter, I said hesitantly, is she implicated in any of this? The detective's expression softened slightly. We're still investigating, but at this point it appears she may have been another victim. Several documents have her signature, but our handwriting experts believe some may have been forged as well. We'll need to interview her, of course. Catherine emerged from the house, then carrying 2 large duffel bags stuffed with clothing and personal items. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she had stopped crying. She looked small and lost in a way I hadn't seen since she was a child. The detective excused himself to supervise the officers inside, leaving me alone with my daughter. What's going to happen now? She asked in a small voice. You're coming home with me, I said firmly, taking one of the duffel bags. We'll figure everything else out later. For once, she didn't argue. As we loaded her bags into my car, a commotion at the house drew our attention. Jackson was being led out in handcuffs, flanked by 2 officers. When he spotted us, his face contorted with rage. Catherine, he shouted, don't tell them anything. This is all a misunderstanding. Before she could respond, he turned his fury toward me. This is your fault, Rosalind. You couldn't stand to see us happy, could you? Had to ruin everything. One of the officers firmly guided him toward the waiting police car. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As they put Jackson in the back of the cruiser, Catherine stood frozen beside me, watching the man she had married being taken away. I couldn't read her expression. Shock, grief, anger, confusion. Perhaps all of these at once. He told me you were trying to control us, she whispered almost to herself. He said all the financial stuff was just temporary, that he had big deals coming through. He said you were jealous because we had a nicer house than you ever did. I didn't respond immediately, letting her process her thoughts. I believed him, she continued, her voice breaking, over my own mother, the person who has always been there for me. I put my arm around her shoulders. Let's go home, Catherine. We can talk there. As we drove away from the beautiful Tudor home, now surrounded by police tape and curious onlookers, Catherine stared out the window in silence. The dream house had become a nightmare, a symbol of deceit rather than new beginnings. Back at my condominium, I made us both tea, a ritual that had comforted us through many difficult conversations over the years. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same one that had been in our family home when Catherine was growing up. I didn't know, she said finally, her eyes fixed on her mug. About the loans, the forgeries, the lawsuit. He told me he was handling our finances, that I shouldn't worry about it. How long has this been going on? I asked gently. Catherine's shoulders slumped. I don't know. He's always been secretive about money. At first, I thought it was because he was surprising me with things being romantic. Then it became just how we operated. He handled the money, I handled the house. And the way you both treated me, I couldn't help asking. Was that his idea too? Her face crumpled in shame. He would say things, about how you were trying to control us through money, how you didn't respect him as the man of the house. At first, I defended you, but he was so convincing, so hurt by it. Eventually, I started seeing things his way. She looked up at me, the tears streaming again. I'm so sorry, Mom. The things we said to you, the way we treated you at the party, it was cruel and ungrateful and horrible. I reached across the table and took her hand. I won't pretend it didn't hurt because it did, deeply. But you're my daughter, Catherine. I love you, and that doesn't change. How can you forgive me so easily? She asked, wiping her eyes. I didn't say I've forgiven everything yet, I clarified. That will take time. But I understand manipulation and how it works. Jackson isolated you from me because I represented a threat to his control. It's a classic tactic of manipulative people. Catherine nodded slowly. The detective asked if I would press charges too for the forged signatures. I don't know what to do. That's a decision only you can make, I said. But whatever you decide, I'll support you. As the evening wore on, Catherine received a call from the detective handling the case. There was more evidence of Jackson's deception. Credit cards in her name. She knew nothing about loans taken against her car title, even attempts to access my bank accounts using personal information that Catherine had unwittingly provided him. He's been living a complete lie, she said after hanging up. The detective says his business has been failing for years. All those trips, the expensive clothes, the fancy restaurants, it was all funded by debt and fraud. We talked late into the night, beginning the painful process of untangling the web of lies and manipulation that had nearly destroyed our relationship. Catherine cried often, oscillating between anger at Jackson's betrayal and shame at her own complicity. I don't know who I am anymore, she confessed at one point. I've spent the last 3 years trying to be who he wanted me to be. I gave up my marketing career because he said it wasn't prestigious enough. I stopped seeing my old friends because he said they were jealous of our lifestyle. You're still you, I assured her. The core of who you are hasn't changed. You just got lost for a while. As we prepared for bed, Catherine in her old room that I'd maintained as a guest room, she paused in the doorway. Mom, what's going to happen to the house? I sighed, having pondered this question myself. For now, it's part of a criminal investigation. After that's concluded, I'll probably sell it. Too many bad memories attached to it now. She nodded in agreement. I never want to see it again. The next few weeks were difficult but healing. Catherine cooperated fully with the investigation, discovering the extent of Jackson's deception was even greater than initially thought. He had accumulated over $500,000 in debt, much of it in Catherine's name, without her knowledge. With my encouragement, Catherine filed for divorce and identity theft charges against Jackson. He remained in jail, unable to make the substantial bail set by the judge due to his flight risk status. As for the Tudor house, once the investigation was complete, I put it on the market. The proceeds from the sale allowed me to pay off the debts Jackson had accumulated in Catherine's name and still have enough to purchase 2 small but comfortable condominiums, one for me and one for Catherine in the same complex. It wasn't the luxury home she had briefly enjoyed, but it was hers, free and clear, with no strings or manipulations attached. 8 months have passed since that fateful housewarming party. The leaves are turning golden outside my window as I sit with my morning coffee, reflecting on how much has changed. My phone chimes with a text from Catherine. Class finished early, lunch at that new cafe at 12:30. I smile as I type my reply. See you there. Catherine's transformation over these months has been remarkable. After the dust settled from Jackson's arrest and the subsequent divorce proceedings, she faced a difficult choice: continue seeing herself as a victim or rebuild her life on her own terms. To my immense pride, she chose the latter. With the cloud of Jackson's financial crimes hanging over her, returning to her former marketing position wasn't an option. Instead, she decided to pivot completely. I've always been interested in psychology, she told me one evening, especially now after experiencing manipulation firsthand. Maybe I could help others recognize the signs I missed. She enrolled in a graduate program in counseling psychology, focusing on victims of financial and emotional abuse. Between classes, she works part-time at a women's resource center, sharing her story with others who have experienced similar manipulation. The early days weren't easy. Catherine struggled with shame, self-doubt, and grief for the relationship she thought she had. There were nights when she called me in tears, questioning every decision she'd ever made. How could I have been so blind, she would ask. How did I let him turn me against you? Manipulation happens gradually. I would remind her, echoing the words of the therapist we both started seeing. It's like the story of boiling a frog. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump out immediately. But if you put it in cool water and heat it slowly, the frog never notices the danger until it's too late. As for Jackson, his case moved through the legal system with devastating consequences for him. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he eventually accepted a plea deal, 15 years for multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The judge was particularly harsh given the number of victims and Jackson's complete lack of remorse. Catherine attended the sentencing hearing not out of lingering attachment, but as part of her healing process. I needed to see it end, she explained afterward. I needed to hear him admit what he did. When Jackson was led away in handcuffs, Catherine told me she felt nothing but relief. It's finally over, she said. I can move forward now. And move forward she has. The young woman who wants to find herself through her husband's status symbols has discovered a strength and purpose she never knew she possessed. She lives simply now, finding joy in achievements rather than acquisitions. Our relationship has healed too, though, in a new form. We're more honest with each other, more willing to address difficult truths. Catherine has apologized multiple times for her treatment of me during her marriage, and I've acknowledged the ways my own behavior might have made her vulnerable to someone like Jackson. I think I was so focused on providing for you materially that I sometimes forgot to help you build emotional strength. I admitted during one of our deeper conversations. I wanted to protect you from struggles, but maybe that just made you less equipped to recognize red flags. Catherine considered this thoughtfully. Maybe. But you always came from a place of love, Mom. Jackson's protection was really control. That's the difference. As for me, I've found new purpose as well. The experience with the luxury house and its aftermath led me to volunteer with a financial literacy program for older adults. I share my story as a cautionary tale about the importance of protecting one's assets, even when family is involved. Love and financial decisions should sometimes be kept separate. I tell my groups, you can support your loved ones without putting your own security at risk. Sometimes people ask if I regret buying that house. The truth is complicated. I regret the pain and betrayal that followed, but the experience ultimately brought Catherine back to me, not as a dependent child, but as a strong, independent woman. It exposed the true nature of the man she had married before he could do even more damage, and it taught us both valuable lessons about trust boundaries and the true meaning of generosity. The cafe where I'm meeting Catherine is busy when I arrive. I spot her at a corner table, textbooks spread out, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looks up and waves her smile, genuine and warm. As I make my way to her, I reflect on how love sometimes requires difficult choices. My gift of the luxury house wasn't what Catherine needed, though I couldn't have known that then. What she needed was the strength to stand on her own, to rebuild her life after betrayal, to discover her own worth beyond material possessions. Sometimes true generosity means allowing someone to find their own path, even when that path is harder than the one you would choose for them. And sometimes the most valuable gift isn't a house or money or things at all. It's the unwavering belief that they have the strength to rise from their own ashes. Catherine hugs me as I sit down. I got an A on my trauma counseling paper, she announces proudly. The professor said my personal insights added depth to the research. That's wonderful, I replied, genuinely thrilled for her. I always knew you were capable of amazing things. I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. She says, her eyes sincere. Not just the financial help, but the way you never gave up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. As we order lunch and fall into easy conversation, I silently thank the universe for second chances, for the opportunity to rebuild what was broken, and for the wisdom to recognize that sometimes losing everything material can lead to gaining what truly matters. Have you ever had to make a tough decision regarding family and money? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more tales of resilience and healing. Remember that true wealth isn't measured by the homes we own, but by the authentic connections we nurture. Thank you for joining me today, and may you find the courage to prioritize truth over comfort in your own relationships.